Day one in the dramatic trial between Prince Harry and the Daily Mail exploded. Yes, he's coming for these two women, Katie Nichols and Rebecca English, arguably the most famous royal correspondents in the world, accusing them of breaking the law. But he also turned up looking like a broken man, looking 20 years older, and I'm not just talking about the fact that he's losing his hair. Watch.
Yeah. Of course. Morning, sir.
Morning, sir. Morning, Harry.
Morning.
Morning, Harry.
Morning.
You confident?
Good luck, sir.
And don't get me wrong, this is a celebrity event. Liz Hurley also there with her son. So too, Sadie Frost. But of course, this is all about the Duke. Because what he is doing is driving a wedge between the British royal family and potentially the British press forever. Yet a spokesperson telling the Daily Telegraph that he landed in the UK feeling confident and ready. And most critically, and this really matters, there was no settlement today. If this case was going to be settled, it would have happened on the steps of court this morning. What this means is that Harry will be in the witness box, will be in the dock, giving evidence this Thursday, and Dan Wootton, Outspoken, will, of course, bring you a special show at 7 p.m. UK time Thursday. That's 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, to deal with everything that goes on because his reputation is on the line. Brittany, from the Royal News Network, doesn't believe it's going to go his way, posting a fool and his money are soon parted. That will be Harry's story here. And Brittany, look, I do want to get into a lot of the specifics because we are going to provide the coverage of this trial that you cannot get from the mainstream media, you cannot get from the Royal Rota because they are complicit, Brittany. They're totally complicit. Of course, they're not going to cover it fairly. Their star journalists are on the line here. But firstly, do you still believe that after the first day's evidence that this is going to go very badly for Prince Harry? Because, of course, David Sherborne, his slippery, slimy lawyer, made a very strong case.
He did make a strong case. And, of course, Harry probably has a little bit of a case here. But at the same time, I saw a little bit of how the Daily Mail is refuting these arguments, saying, you know what? His friends like to talk to the press. He even socialized with Katie Nichols, invited her to a party with him. And so this whole idea that he doesn't know how any of this information got out there, it's just sort of a little ridiculous. I mean, obviously, a lot of it had to do with friends, some of the palace officers, these sorts of things. And yes, maybe he wasn't fully aware. Maybe he was a bit hungover when they told the press this, and he just doesn't remember. Either way, I don't think this is a strong case. You also have the question of, is this outside the statute of limitations, which I believe is 6 years for privacy cases? That is a big question here as well. So I think this is sort of a fool's errand. Anytime you subject yourself to being on the stand, you can be made to look like an absolute fool. And I think that's potentially what's going to happen to Harry here. I would strongly, strongly think that's what's going to happen. And honestly, what is the point of any of this? Because the media doesn't really have to do this anymore. Celebrities share more about themselves on social media now than the media could ever figure out. So, and who has violated Harry's privacy more? Is it the person who shared, the palace official who shared a little bit about the memory of his mother, or Harry telling us that he had to rub cream on his penis before his brother's wedding because it was frostbitten? So I don't think anybody's violated Harry's privacy more than Harry.
No, of course not. And these are the type of images that we now see put out by the couple themselves. So, of course, Brittany, I absolutely fundamentally agree with you that this case is ludicrous. It is about personal revenge. He wants newspapers to be shut down. They're already dying. It's going to happen anyway, Harry. And he wants journalists who he dislikes to go to jail. The problem is, though, Brittany, that doesn't actually matter if Rebecca English and Katie Nicholl did break the law. Now, I set out right from the start here that I feel incredibly confident talking about all of this. I mean, there is Rebecca English, by the way, with Prince Harry. I mean, they had a close relationship in the past. They knew each other. And I feel very confident when I start my coverage of this trial, Brittany, in terms of saying, yes, I work for those organizations, including The Sun, including the Mail and Mail Online, but you are going to get total honesty from me because hand on heart, I have never, ever broken the law in my pursuit of a story, ever. Now, Harry accused me of doing so, Brittany, and he was wrong. And he had to withdraw the pre-action letter. It actually regarded how I revealed the story of Megxit. He tried to claim that there had been payment to public officials, which would have broken the law. It was absolute lies, and he would have lost in court. So I come here today, Brittany, as someone who can hand on heart say that during all of my time in journalism, breaking all of these massive stories about the royal family, I did so legally. You can do so legally. I never used a private investigator, never hacked a phone. You can look at all of my evidence, which was given under oath in court at the Leveson inquiry. So I'm also not just going to be an apologist for the newspapers here, Brittany, if it does look like they were breaking the law. And these two women are obviously absolutely central to the case. To remind you, this is Rebecca English. She still works at the Daily Mail. She is their royal editor and one of the co-hosts of the Palace Confidential YouTube show. Watch.
Of the Invictus Games in my role as a royal correspondent when Harry was a working member of the royal family. And Richard's right, they are absolutely amazing events. And it just feels, I don't know, it feels to me slightly distasteful that, you know, the amazing efforts of these men and women are kind of being used as a pawn in a kind of, you know, a public game between father and son, which is why I think, you know, very strongly, I know people within royal circles believe this is something that should be addressed between them privately.
Okay, so that's Rebecca English. If you watch Palace Confidential, you'll know who she is. I don't know her well. I don't have a personal relationship. I do know Katie Nicholl. She is a lovely, lovely woman. I just always want to be clear, Brittany, so that I'm transparent about any personal relationships that I have with people, because what you'll find is the mainstream media are never honest about that, and it means you don't get truthful coverage. But here was the big revelation that came from court just before 1 p.m. We are now hearing, this is Imogen James, who's reporting inside the court for the BBC, by the way. We are now hearing about Prince Harry's former girlfriend, Chelsea Davy. Sherborne, that's David Sherborne, Prince Harry's lawyer, shows an email which includes information about a flight she took in 2007. It shows her seat number, flight times, and travel plans. It is alleged Daily Mail royal editor Rebecca English used the services of investigator Mike Baer to obtain this information. Sherborne claims there is no way anyone reading this could have thought the information obtained was done so legally. And he goes on, or the report goes on, a later email exchange is then shown between English and Baer from 2013. In it, Baer shares the flight details of Prince Harry. English acknowledges this, and Sherborne says she knows perfectly well what he's doing, referring to the alleged blagging by Baer. Sherborne notes that Prince Harry travelled using a pseudonym. This would make it much harder to find any information about his travel plans. English then names Prince Harry's protection officer. Baer replies with the details of the flight, showing the number and times. Now, of course, Brittany, this is the opening argument. This is day one. And so for people who don't know how the UK justice system works, the KC, or in this case, the barrister, will outline the strongest possible argument that they can. That's why there's a lot of headlines on day one. What we don't have at this point is the detailed cross-examination, being able to look in detail at the email. But the extraordinary thing here, though, is that Harry is coming for the heart of the royal operation of the Daily Mail. Rebecca English controls royal coverage at that newspaper, has done so for years and years, works directly with Buckingham Palace, is considered to be very accurate in terms of what she reports because it is usually briefed by the palaces. And so this is an absolute declaration of war, because what his legal team is effectively doing is accusing her of illegal practices, and she is still working there, still covering the British royal family, still hosting this show. If Harry wins this case, all of that collapses, surely.
Yes, this is very much, Dan, Harry's vendetta against the media, against people who he used to interact with. Remember, there was that famous instance where he was on tour in Africa and Rhiannon Mills asked him a question from Sky News, and he chastised her for asking this question and, like, basically was really condescending to her. Harry has this immense anger towards the press, but the reality is the press serves an important purpose, and the press is there to reveal certain things. Yes, maybe not everything Harry once revealed. That is the burden of any public figure. But she has a job to do, and it's an important job because the royals are held to a higher standard because they are taking taxpayer money for their protection officers, for their staff, for their homes, these sorts of things. And so it's very important that there is a level of transparency. And the reality is, Harry, again, has all these nefarious intentions behind everyone when it may have just been that, hey, Chelsea signed up for this flight. Somehow it got to a friend or something, and they leaked it to the media. Like, there are numerous ways for information to get out there. And it's unfortunate, and it's an unfortunate aspect of Harry's life that he has been born into. But there are a lot of, I would say, bad actors out there in the media, of course, but there's a lot of good ones too. And Harry wants to smear everyone. And he wants to smear the Daily Mail because he didn't like how they treated Meghan Markle and himself. And he wants to destroy his critics. That is what he wants to do. He wants to make sure no one can say a bad word about him anymore because he can't handle the fact that he's not as popular as he used to be. And so he has to take his anger out, I think, more on because of his anger in his personal life, he takes it out on media figures. And I think that's really, really unfortunate. We'll have to see whether or not Rebecca English broke the law or not. I would imagine she's pretty above board, but we'll have to see. But I imagine the Daily Mail will have a pretty good response to him.
Indeed, and that hasn't come yet. Of course, Katie Nicholl is someone who I do know. Brittany, she's never appeared here on Outspoken, but she did used to appear on my former show at GB News, Dan Wootton Tonight, and I've known her for years, and I genuinely think she is a good woman, and I know this has taken a real toll on her, so I'm just putting it out there that I know and I like Katie Nicholl, but of course, I will cover what has happened fairly. This is Katie, because some people may need their memory sparked. Watch.
When you hear them talk about the huge traumatic impact it's had on them, and of course for those boys, even as men now and fathers themselves, to know that something like this could have changed their course of history and fate, I think is really challenging. Of course, for us as broadcasters, it plays into that self-doubt, duplicitous news gathering, deceit, all of the things that are not helpful from our position, and frankly should have been dealt with a long time.
And for years, Katie Nicholl was considered the absolute queen of reporting on the young royals because she came up through the Mail on Sunday where she was the society columnist and she socialised with them. She was at the clubs with a lot of them. And she no longer works for the Mail, but is a respected freelance broadcaster, often appearing on Piers Morgan Uncensored and the BBC for major state events. She is raised in this case as well. This from Tom Simmons, reporting from the High Court at 11:48. The claimant's opening statement accuses a string of senior Mail and Mail on Sunday journalists of commissioning unlawfully gathered information from private investigators. In a court document, they say journalists and executives across the Mail titles engaged in or were complicit in the culture of unlawful information gathering that wrecked the lives of so many. The document claims that Katie Nicholl, now a well-known journalist commenting and reporting on the royal family, of course the BBC doesn't mention that she does it for the BBC, had commissioned an infamous private investigation firm, variously known as ELI, TDI, and BDI, to get intimate information about actor Sadie Frost Law's private life. This, the document says, included the termination of her pregnancy, something she hadn't even told her mother about. The journalist was operating a hotbed of unlawful information gathering, the claimant alleges. A managing editor, John Wellington, signed off hundreds of invoices for work that bear the hallmarks of unlawful information gathering, including for the indisputable voicemail interception of Sadie Frost Law and Sir Simon Hughes, a former Liberal Democrat minister, the opening statement says. And what's interesting about that, Brittany, is it shows why other celebrities are involved in this. Elton John, too, who was the guy who got Prince Harry into this, of course, close friends with his mother, Princess Diana, said he felt his home had been violated. They were accusing the Daily Mail publishers of invasion of medical details surrounding the birth of their son Zachary and the stealing of his birth certificate before we even had a chance to see it ourselves. So, Brittany, other celebrities are also making claims.
Day one of Prince Harry versus the Daily Mail didn't just begin, it detonated. This wasn't a calm legal dispute. It was a declaration of war. Harry didn't just sue a newspaper, he named and shamed two of the most powerful royal journalists alive, accusing them of criminal conduct. That is not reform. That is scorched earth. Let's be brutally honest. Harry walked into court looking exhausted, aged, and hollow. Not confident. Not triumphant. But worn down. This isn't about hair loss jokes, it's about the visible toll of obsession, resentment, and years of legal warfare. For someone who claims peace and healing, this looked like the opposite. Yes, celebrities were there. Yes, it felt like an event. But underneath the spectacle is something far darker. Harry is attempting to permanently sever the relationship between the British monarchy and the British press. That doesn't just affect newspapers. It affects how the monarchy survives. Here's the key detail many missed: there was no settlement. If this case were weak, it would have ended on the court steps. It didn't. Which means Harry will take the stand. That's not bravery, that's risk. Because once you testify, you lose narrative control. Even supporters admit this is dangerous. Yes, Harry might have a case. But the defense is already devastating. Friends spoke to the press. He socialized with journalists. He invited them into his circle. The idea that he has no idea how information got out is, frankly, implausible. Let's pause on something crucial. Who violated Harry's privacy more? Journalists reporting palace gossip? Or Harry himself detailing intimate bodily moments in a book? The truth is uncomfortable. Harry has monetized his own privacy more aggressively than any tabloid ever did. This is not about justice. This is about revenge. About punishing journalists he dislikes. About shutting down criticism. Harry doesn't want accountability, he wants silence. And that should terrify anyone who believes in a free press. Here's where it gets serious. The journalists named aren't fringe figures. They are central pillars of royal reporting. Accusing them of illegal activity isn't commentary, it's an attempt to end careers. And if Harry wins, entire newsrooms collapse. Here's the uncomfortable truth: mainstream media cannot cover this honestly. Why? Because their own stars are in the dock. That's why independent commentary matters, because conflicts of interest are everywhere. This is the explosive heart of day one. Flight details. Seat numbers. Private emails. Private investigators. On the surface, it looks damning. But remember, this is an opening argument, not tested evidence.
Their claims might be stronger than Harry's in this particular instance. My understanding of this case is that Harry's claims are among the weaker ones. And of course, we can all acknowledge that for a long time, there was a very aggressive sort of press-seeking or information-seeking aspect of the British press that was quite invasive. And that was, in the early days of technology, able to be a little bit more, you could say, done with, obviously, voicemail hacking that happened to Catherine and William numerous times, and a couple other things, putting listening devices and these sorts of things. And so, of course, there might be a basis for some of this. I think the big question, though, is who has a good case and who doesn't. And are these cases outside the statute of limitations? Because they have who have known about these privacy invasions within the last 6 years. If it's beyond that, they don't have a case. And so I think the big question is, what is the case here? How strong is it? And can the Daily Mail back up some of its reporting? How good is its record keeping? Because that's going to be really, really critical here. I think, again, we can all agree that there were some aspects of the British media that went too far, but not all of them. And maybe in some instances, unfortunately, if you are a celebrity, there is an incentive for the people around you to go to the media to maybe make a little bit of cash. And that is always going to be the burden of being a celebrity in many ways. That's been decreased quite a bit because of social media, but that's definitely a challenge that exists. And so that's going to be the big question, whether it was invasive or just they had a friend who wanted some money.
Yeah, well, Harry's team are alleging 14 articles about him used unlawfully gathered information. BBC's royal correspondent says that the unlawfully gathered information includes using private investigators, which were published by Associated Publications between 2001 and 2013. Among them is a claim that an article was based on intrusion into a conversation between Prince Harry and his brother Prince William over a memorial for their mother and the planned involvement of Sir Elton John in the project. But the thing is, Brittany, we're going to have to see evidence here. We really are. This decision is going to be made by a judge, Justice Nicklin, on the basis of probability. But for me, it's about seeing the evidence, because what I do know from these cases in the past, Brittany, is that sometimes an assumption can be made about where a story has come from, and the person who the story is about gets it completely wrong and assumes, oh, well, that could only have come from phone hacking or from a private investigator. But indeed, sometimes the story may have been briefed by their own PR, someone in their office, a family member. So I need to see the evidence here on all 14, because I'm not just taking what Harry is saying as read. No way.
Exactly. And what we see as well, Dan, is that Harry is very, very paranoid and delusional. We've seen this recently, and even in his statement, he comes across as very overdramatic of like, this was destroying my life. I couldn't trust anybody. It was just sort of craziness. And I think Harry, unfortunately, with hindsight being 2020 in some ways, I think he's over contextualized and obsessed over these stories in his head as well. And some of it too is the breakdown of his relationship with Chelsea Davy. He blames the press, but it was probably Harry. And so he can't just accept the fact that, hey, yeah, sometimes, you know what? People were talking to the press, and maybe they talked to the press quite a bit. Maybe you weren't nice to them that day. Maybe they thought they were helping you when it actually wasn't all that helpful. I mean, there are just so many questions, and we need some firmer evidence here, and I'm sure we'll get it. But the challenge too is sometimes these conversations happen in private, sort of off the record, something that you can kind of work into an article later. Like it's not verbatim, but it's like, oh, you have permission to say this, but don't use my words exactly, these sorts of things. And so that is going to be somewhat the challenge. But I think if the Daily Mail can prove and say, hey, we don't have any like correspondence from a private investigator over this. This was a private conversation between a journalist and a source. And Harry, I think in his statement, maybe railed against sources and stuff. It's like, Harry, that's how the media works. It's sources, especially in royal reporting. It's never the exact person. Usually it's just a source. And how people sort of prove themselves as royal journalists is having a consistent track record. Then the sources that we're seeing have more credence. So Harry just doesn't even understand the media, but he doesn't care to. This is all about revenge, all about his vindictive spite, and how he's just getting all this criticism and he can't handle it.
Exactly. And was it worth it? I mean, there's Harry over the weekend. That's the type of stuff he probably should be doing. Look at him today, though, Brittany. It is impossible not to see the toll that this has taken on this guy. Was it worth it? Was it really worth it? But look, we've got Tom Sykes of the Royalist Substack inside the court. He does think Harry got off to a good start. Brittany, firstly talking about the fact that there was no last-minute settlement. He arrived shortly after 10 a.m., still expected to give evidence on Thursday. And Sykes says, I have to say, despite having been a massive skeptic about Harry's case, largely because of a shady private investigator called Gavin Burrows recanting his witness statement, which was the only explicit admission of phone hacking, I feel, after being in court for the first morning of activity, that Associated Newspapers Limited, the publisher of the Daily Mail, could be in real trouble here. Of course, I should qualify that by saying that the claimants get to go first, and we will have to wait and see how compelling the Mail's rebuttals are. David Sherborne, Harry's barrister, leapt up at 10:30 a.m, outlined his case by saying that Paul Dacre and other senior Mail executives gave evidence at the Levis inquiry and emphatically denied unlawful information gathering. Sherborne said that the denials on oath were false and there was clear, systematic and sustained use of UIG at the Mail and the Mail on Sunday. He said that A&L knew that the emphatic denials they made were not true, and he focused on a few key characters, especially Katie Nicholl and Rebecca English. Now, this is interesting. Rebecca, a founder of the Royal Rota Press pool. We know how much she hates how much he hates the Royal Rota. Then a focus on a guy called Lee Harpen, providing information for 14 articles written by Nicholl and English, who is described as one of the biggest phone hackers in the country. And he was able to produce that email chain, of course, that we looked at. Now, English claimed in pretrial submissions not to remember the email and that she got the information from students at Leeds, where Chelsea was at college. But Sherborne effectively destroyed this claim in court by showing her thanking Mike for the intel and discussing payment for it. The so-called skeleton argument of the claimants and A&L's response was also released today. In his written submission, Harry said, I find it deeply troubling that Associated used phrases such as sources and friends and the like as a device to hide unlawful information gathering. I find it shocking to learn from disclosure that Associated were even using Mike Baer to blag my flight details as late as 2014 for work that he did not even want to put into writing. Sherborne also gave a compelling account of how a talented voice actor billed the Mail up to £11,000 a month for blagging intel about Harry. So in lots of ways, it isn't looking good. But of course, we have to see now what the Mail comes back with, because there are huge questions over a lot of this evidence. And remember, we've covered in the past the dirty, dark arts that Harry is relying on, because it is criminals who are providing the information for his case. Now, Brittany, what's potentially most interesting is that the British royal family going to great lengths to keep away from Harry. They want nothing to do with him. Charles in Edinburgh, William and Catherine heading there too. Really, this is bad news for the British royal family, isn't it? And what is potentially positive is that there will be pictures coming out overnight of the royals doing their work, Brittany, as Harry tries to destroy their relationship with the British media once and for all.
It's so important, Dan, that I think the royals put their best foot forward right now. And I think they really are. William and Charles and Camilla and Catherine, they all understand the realities of the media, which is that, yes, there are certain aspects of the media that I'm sure they dislike. But interacting with the media is sort of a necessary evil. And they have to understand, I think, in a lot of ways as well, that when it comes to the media, yes, they might have a good relationship with a person in the press, but the person will still maybe publish stories that they don't necessarily like from time to time, or spin it in a way that they don't like it. But that's sort of, again, the reality of being a public figure. That's what you have to sort of kind of, I think, understand in your mind and settle with, is that aspect of royal journalism, because they're not just there to float happy stories all the time. There will be stories challenging the duchies of Cornwall and Lancaster, and that is a healthy thing for the media to do. And they also do some amazing work. And really, the best way for the royals to get their work out there is through media. Now, I think the royals can do better with their social media strategy so that they can have a more direct line to the people. But the press is just part of their world. They can't get away from it. And you just have to, I think, understand that as a royal, you can't get away from it. And if you have a good relationship with the press, generally, you will have a good, you will generally get good reporting. I've had very good interactions with the Danish members of the Danish royal palace, and it's been lovely, and I've enjoyed it immensely. And so to me, that's just an example of how you can kind of have a good relationship with the press by just being nice and kind and these sorts of things. And it goes a long way with the press, and they will report good and bad, but mostly good for you, in part because they like you, but in part just because they want to make sure if they're going with, let's say, a negative story, that they have a lot of background behind them. And maybe it's just to offer a little bit of challenge to the royal family. And I think that's a good thing too.
It really is. I mean, gosh, there is so much going on this week, Brittany. Thank you so much for your analysis. I know you will have much more over at the Royal News Network, so make sure you subscribe.
Opening statements are designed to shock, not prove. Rebecca English isn't just a journalist. She is a conduit between palace and press. By accusing her of criminality, Harry isn't targeting one woman, he's attacking the entire royal reporting ecosystem. If she falls, so does the system. This isn't new. Harry has always resented journalists who challenge him. He's lashed out before. He's humiliated reporters publicly. But here's the reality. The press exists to scrutinize power, not protect feelings. Harry's strategy appears simple. Paint all journalists as villains. That's reckless. Because it ignores the fact that without the press, the monarchy loses legitimacy. Accountability cuts both ways. This case is bigger than Harry, Elton John, Sadie Frost, others. Some claims may be strong. Some may not. But even insiders admit, Harry's claims are among the weakest. Here's the legal reality no one wants to discuss. If these invasions were known more than 6 years ago, the case dies. No matter how emotional. No matter how dramatic. Facts and timelines will decide this, not trauma narratives. This is critical. Just because information is published does not mean it was hacked. Sources exist. Friends talk.pr teams leak. Family members brief. Harry assumes criminality, but assumptions don't win court cases. Harry's statements reveal something troubling, a belief that everyone was out to get him. That mindset turns speculation into certainty. And certainty into obsession. Courts don't deal in feelings, they deal in evidence. Look at him. Is this worth it? The stress. The isolation. The visible decline. This isn't a man at peace, this is a man consumed. While Harry fights the press, the royals work. Charles. William. Catherine. Photos will emerge. Duty continues. And that contrast is devastating. The royals understand something Harry doesn't. You don't destroy the press, you manage it. Good and bad coverage comes with the crown. That's the price of power. This trial will decide more than guilt or innocence. It will decide the future of royal journalism, the limits of celebrity power, whether grievance can override evidence. And once Harry testifies, there is no turning back. Now it's over to you. Is Prince Harry standing up for justice or waging personal revenge? Should journalists be criminalized for using sources? Has Harry misunderstood how the media works or exposed something rotten? Drop your view in the comments. Like if you believe free press matters. Subscribe for uncensored royal commentary. Because this isn't just about Harry, it's about power, accountability, and who controls the story.